Anastasia had learned that rejection rarely arrived as a slammed door. It arrived as paperwork, renamed ledgers, and quiet signatures that decided a woman could be owned if enough men agreed. Blood was supposed to mean belonging in Ironhold, yet blood had only marked where chains fit best. Chosen love belonged to stories servants whispered over dying fires, not to branded wolves. Still, on the nights she survived, she had kept one stubborn hope. If she ever reached ground where no one knew her name, she might become a person again instead of a possession. By dawn, the kitchens of Ironhold Fortress already smelled of ash, boiled bones, and old fear. Anastasia Ironhold knelt on wet flagstones with a brush in one hand and a cracked bucket in the other, scrubbing a line of dried blood from the seam where the servants' corridor met the great hall. Her knuckles were split. Her shoulders shook from exhaustion she refused to show. Every time she bent, the scar across her back pulled tight, then burned. Fresh, angry red where yesterday's restraint straps had reopened skin that never truly healed. "Harder!" snapped Mistress Vale, the house steward, from above her. "If Lord Dante sees streaks, I'll have your hide salted." Anastasia kept her eyes on the stone. "Yes, mistress." No lip. "I said yes, mistress." A boot struck the bucket. Filthy water sloshed over her lap, soaking the coarse servant's shift she wore because linen for branded wolves was considered wasted cloth. Around her throat, beneath the frayed collar, the forged claim mark Dante had pressed into her skin years ago pulsed faintly, like an old bruise that refused to die. Destiny, he had called it the night he branded her. Ownership. She scrubbed until her wrists cramped. Above her, the fortress woke in layers, guards changing post, noble doors opening, laughter drifting down from warm rooms she was forbidden to enter unless summoned to be useful. Ironhold had been her birthright once, before records were corrected, before her name was cut from family ledgers and replaced with a servant's tally mark, and before Evelina learned how to smile while she watched her bleed. The twins had been born minutes apart. Anastasia had spent years pretending minutes were enough to make them strangers. By midday, she was sent to the upper gallery with a tray of spiced wine and sliced pear. She kept her head bowed as she entered Dante's solar, but she saw everything anyway. The wolfskin rugs, the silver maps of border territories, the black wax seals stacked beside rolled scrolls. Evelina lounged by the window in soft cream silk, one hand curved delicately over her flat stomach like she already adored a child that did not yet exist. Dante stood behind her, fingers draped over her shoulder like a man displaying a jewel he'd stolen. "Ah," he said, when Anastasia stepped in. "There she is, my wayward little oath." He always spoke to her as if they were alone, even when others listened. Anastasia set the tray down. "My lord, look at me." She did. Dante's smile was handsome from a distance and monstrous up close. "You ran from the East stables yesterday. I was sent for tack oil. You were gone 14 minutes too long." Evelina clicked her tongue. "You must stop provoking him, Anna. He gets so worried." Worried? Anastasia pressed her nails into her palm to keep from laughing. Dante's worry came with iron cuffs, not concern. He crossed the room, took her chin between his fingers, and tilted her face into the light as if checking livestock teeth. "Still pretty under the bruises," he murmured. "I told them not to strike your face. You should be grateful." The room narrowed. She could smell clove smoke on his breath, the metallic tang of his signet ring, the sharp sweetness of Evelina's perfume. Night-blooming jasmine, always too strong. "Tell me you're grateful," Dante said. Anastasia swallowed. "Thank you, my lord." "Better." He released her with a shove. She stumbled but did not fall. Evelina rose, gliding toward her. Up close, their resemblance was a cruel joke. Same dark hair, same mouth, same storm-gray eyes. But Evelina's were polished mirrors, reflecting only what benefited her. I need blue thread from the east storeroom, Evelina said. Not the common spool, the moon-dyed one. That storeroom is locked, lady. Then beg a key. Dante laughed softly. If she fails, lash her. We leave for Shadowfang in 3 days. I don't tolerate delays. The word hit Anastasia like cold water. Shadowfang is hosting a public supply summit, and Men is hosting a public supply summit, and men with ruined territories are very easy to persuade. Dante's gaze sharpened on Anastasia. And because it is time, the North accepted proper succession. She lowered her head and backed away. At the door, Dante called after her, voice honeyed and hard. Don't dream of running, little wolf. The bond finds you. It always does. The breaking point came that night with rain hammering the slate roofs and thunder rolling over the mountains like drums. Anastasia should have been in the laundry cellar mending uniforms, but Mistress Vale sent her to Dante's solar for forgotten ledgers. The corridor outside was empty. The door stood ajar, candlelight spilling through the crack. She meant to knock. Then she heard her own name. She froze, breath held, and listened. Inside, Evelina laughed. You should have seen her face when I touched my belly. She'll serve her purpose, Dante said. Paper rustled, followed by the scrape of glass. Read it. A third voice, male, nasal, likely one of Dante's paid healers, cleared his throat. Record of examination. Lady Evelina Ironhold carries a viable heir, sired by Brennan Shadowfang during private union. Anastasia's fingers went numb. Evelina giggled. The wording is almost poetic. Poetry wins councils, Dante replied. As do relics. Show her the lineage scroll. More rustling. Wax cracked. The healer again. By blood witness and ancestral seal, Evelina Ironhold is declared sole surviving royal issue. Excellent, Dante said. When Brennan is cornered by law and pity, he mates her under emergency succession. Meanwhile, we keep Anastasia breathing long enough to open the war vault. Royal blood and the relic key. Nothing else triggers the old Ironhold arsenals. Evelina's voice dropped, lazy and cruel. And if she refuses? Then we bleed her slower. Lightning flashed through the high windows, bleaching the hallway white. Anastasia staggered back, pressing a hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. Her heart pounded so violently she thought they must hear it through stone. Pregnant claim, forged lineage, war relics, her blood. Not a servant, not even a prisoner. Fuel. Inside, Dante went on, conversational. I've drafted the blood contract in case she runs. Legal mate property under my mark. Any ally harboring her is in violation of Alpha Compact law. Will Shadowfang challenge it? He's rebuilding from massacre. He can't afford scandal. He'll bow to paperwork long enough for us to take his throat. Something ceramic shattered. Evelina must have dropped a cup. Dante chuckled. Careful, darling. You'll cut yourself. I hate waiting. Moonrise after tomorrow. We stage your tears at the summit. If Anastasia appears, all the better. Watching her disappear in front of witnesses will amuse me. Anastasia moved before she consciously decided to move. Down the corridor. Around the corner. Past the servant's stair and into darkness thick with damp and smoke. She didn't pack. There was nothing she owned that mattered more than time. In the scullery she stole a knife, a heel of bread, and a water skin. In the tack room she took a stable cloak, too big and smelling of horse oil. Then she went to the old west passage sealed since childhood fires, a narrow chute behind coal bins that led to a rusted grate above the outer ravine. She had discovered it at 9, hiding from punishments. Tonight it became salvation. By the time alarms rang, she was halfway through the chute, belly scraping stone, elbows slick with mud. Someone shouted her name in the courtyard. Wolves barked. A horn blared once, twice. Anastasia! Dante's voice tore through rain like a blade. Come back and I'll be merciful. Mercy, from him, meant fewer broken bones. She kicked through the grate. It gave with a screech and dropped into black water below. She slid after it, hit the ravine stream hard enough to lose breath, and surfaced choking. Freezing current dragged at her legs. She clawed to the bank, lungs burning, then ran uphill through pines and bramble while thunder chased her. Branches whipped her face. Wet leaves slapped her eyes. Her old back wound split again beneath the borrowed cloak. Every mile she expected the forged bond to tug like a chain in her marrow and turn her back toward Ironhold. It didn't. Or maybe fear outpaced it. Near dawn, she crossed the broken boundary stones where Ironhold sigils had been hacked away and replaced by a wolf head carved rough into granite. Shadowfang territory. No coin, no allies. Just a name she. No coin, no allies. Just a name she couldn't use, and blood everyone wanted. But anonymity was safer than begging for mercy. 2 days later, half-starved and hollow-eyed, Anastasia stood at the edge of what had once been the Shadowfang Market Square. Massacre had left its fingerprints everywhere: burnt beams stacked in salvage piles, shattered statues, fire-blackened stone. Yet among the ruins, rebuilding throbbed with stubborn life. Wolves in work leathers hauled timber. Children carried nails in baskets. A one-armed mason directed traffic with booming curses and a grin. Someone had hung fresh pine garlands over a cracked archway, as if daring winter to come. At the center, long tables were arranged for a public supply summit. Grain tallies, medicine crates, treaty markers. Guards watched every entrance. Not lazy noble guards like Ironholds, but lean soldiers with healed scars and steady eyes. Anastasia kept to the fringe, hood low. She'd traded labor for a bowl of stew the night before and learned enough to try for work in the kitchens. Keep your head down, she told herself. Scrub floors, lift crates, survive one more day. A horn sounded from the north gate. People straightened. Conversation thinned. Then he walked in. Brennan Shadowfang did not look like the polished lords of court portraits. He looked like a storm that had learned restraint. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair tied back at the nape, jaw shadowed from mist sleep. A pale scar cut through one eyebrow and disappeared into his temple. He wore no crown, only a plain iron torque and a sword at his hip dulled from use, not display. Awning. Rain's coming. No one flinched. Awning. Rain's coming. No one flinched when he passed. They straightened with respect, not terror. The difference struck Anastasia harder than hunger. She turned away before he could notice her staring. Then silk rustled near the main aisle. Her blood went cold before she saw the face. Evelina swept into the square draped in ivory and silver, veil pinned with moonstones, eyes reddened on command. Behind her came Ironhold escorts in formal black, and between them, smiling like a man arriving at a feast, Dante. Anastasia backed toward the service lane instinctively. Too late. Evelina lifted both hands dramatically. "Alpha King Brennan," she called, voice carrying clear across the square. "I beg sanctuary and justice. I carry your heir from our private union, and my honor has been threatened by those who deny our bond." A shockwave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Counselors surged forward. Scribes uncapped ink. Someone cursed under their breath. Brennan went very still. "I have had no union with you," he said, voice low but carrying. Evelina's lower lip trembled perfectly. "You would deny me publicly? Before witnesses?" Dante stepped beside her, expression grieved. "My lord, this is delicate. We came only to protect mother and child. We also bring legal concerns regarding a runaway female currently trespassing in your territory. My mate property, Anastasia Ironhold. Dangerous. Delusional." The name hit the air like thrown glass. Heads turned. Anastasia moved, one step, then another, aiming for the alley, for any path out. If Dante saw her, it was over. If Evelina pointed, she'd be dragged back in chains before sunset. Stop. The command cracked behind her. Not Dante. Brennan. She didn't. Fear drove her faster. A hand closed around her wrist. Heat exploded up her arm. The world lurched. Pine smoke and rain and raw lightning slammed through her chest, through bone, through every place the forged mark had ever hurt. Her knees buckled. A sound tore out of her. Half gasp, half wolf whine she hadn't made since girlhood. Brennan sucked in a ragged breath like he'd been struck. His pupils blew wide, then flashed molten gold. His grip loosened instantly, almost reverent, but the invisible tether between them snapped tight and bright and undeniable. Mate. Impossible. Terrible timing, absolute truth. Around them, the square went silent. Brennan stepped between her and the crowd, shoulders squared, voice now edged with a growl that made seasoned warriors recoil. No one touches her. The warning rolled over the square like thunder. Anastasia could still feel his hand on her wrist even after he let go. Heat branded beneath skin, not like Dante's mark, not like iron and pain. This was wildfire and winter air colliding. Her pulse kicked hard, hard, hard. Her wolf, quiet for years under fear and forced obedience, slammed against her ribs with a feral, disbelieving howl. Mine. No, 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 not here. Not now. Not in front of Dante and Evelina and half the Northern Alliance. Brennan stood one pace in front of her, broad back a wall between her and everyone else. His shoulders were rigid, fingers flexing once at his sides, as if fighting the urge to reach for her again. Gold still flared in his eyes when he turned his head, not fully wolf, but close enough that the guards nearest him shifted their feet. Dante recovered first. He spread his hands in performative calm. Alpha King, surely this is a misunderstanding. That female is unstable and legally bound to me. If she has approached you under false pretense. A growl cut him off. Not loud, worse, controlled. Brennan didn't look away from Dante. You will not call her that female in my territory. Evelina stepped forward, voice trembling beautifully. My lord, please. I know this looks strange, but Anastasia has always envied me. She does reckless things for attention. She is my sister, Anastasia heard herself say, though her throat felt scraped raw. She hadn't meant to speak. Every eye snapped to her anyway. Twin. The last word struck like flint. Murmurs surged. Scribes scribbled faster. One of Ironhold's escorts whispered a curse. Evelina's expression glitched for a fraction of a second. Too quick for most to catch. Not quick enough for Anastasia to miss. Then the tears returned. She has delusions about blood and rank. Lord Dante has been so patient with her condition. Condition? Anastasia laughed once, breathless and wrong. She could smell lies now as sharply as jasmine and ink and cold steel. Did you forge the healer's record yourself? Or did he write it while you practiced crying? Dante's smile sharpened. You're overwrought. He took one step toward her. Brennan moved faster. He didn't draw his sword. He didn't need to. He simply shifted his weight and bared just enough fang that 3 veteran wolves in the front row dropped their gaze on instinct. Another step, Brennan said softly, and I remove your leg at the knee. The square went dead silent again. Anastasia stared at the side of his face, a pale scar through the brow. Rain caught in dark lashes. Jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. The bond hummed between them like a struck wire, every breath he took pulling at her own lungs. She hated that her body recognized him before her mind could make room for it. She hated that some buried, starving part of her leaned toward him anyway. Brennan turned to her then, finally, and the world narrowed to storm-gray meeting molten gold. The pull was immediate, merciless. She saw his shock mirrored in her own panic, his pupils blown wide, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent fully. Not perfume, not status oils, not court masks. Her. Mud, rain, blood, smoke, fear. The forged claim mark at her throat pulsed once, a sick echo, and his expression darkened with something close to rage. But when he spoke, his voice was careful. "Can you stand?" Such a small question. No demand, no command, no possession. She swallowed. Yes. He nodded once, as if she'd granted him something vital. Good. Then louder, to the square. Summit is suspended until moonrise. Supplies are still distributed by prior ledger. Counsel and witnesses to the long hall in 1 hour. His gaze cut to Dante and Evelina. You brought claims. You will present them under law. Dante's eyes narrowed. And the runaway? Brennan didn't blink. Remains under my protection. She is my legal mate property by contract. A flash of disgust crossed Brennan's face so stark Anastasia almost reeled from it. There is no such recognized class in Shadowfang territory. There is under Alpha Compact if both marks are witnessed. Brennan's attention flicked to Anastasia's throat. Not staring, assessing. His hands curled again, knuckles whitening. When he looked back at Dante, his tone had gone glacial. Then produce your contract in council and pray your ink survives scrutiny. Dante smiled like he had expected exactly this. Gladly. He offered Evelina his arm. She took it, eyes sliding to Anastasia with bright, poisonous triumph. This isn't over, that look said. It's barely begun. As they turned away, Evelina lifted her hand over her belly again, cradling emptiness like a crown. Anastasia's knees threatened to buckle. Adrenaline crashed, leaving her cold and shaking. She took a step back on instinct, needing distance from everyone, from him most of all. The bond yanked. Not physically. Something worse. An ache that unfurled through her chest at the thought of putting more than a few paces between them. She sucked in air, startled by the depth of it. Brennan heard it. Easy, he murmured. Too low for others. First strike hurts. She stared at him. You say that like you've done this before. His mouth twitched without humor. Never. A beat. Rain tapped the awning overhead. He lifted both hands, palms open, showing empty space between them. I won't touch you again without permission. The statement hit harder than the bond. Anastasia had no reply for that. She didn't have language for men who asked. He gestured to a gray-haired woman in leather armor near the main table. Captain Risa, escort Lady Anastasia to the inner keep. Guest chamber. 2 guards. Female rotation. No one enters without her consent and mine. Risa blinked once at the title lady, then thumped fist to chest. Yes, my king. I'm not... Anastasia began. Brennan looked back at her, eyes no longer feral but still bright with heat. You're under threat in my territory. That is enough. She should have argued. Should have run before Dante found a way through law and ink. Instead, she stood there drenched and trembling while the mate bond sang through her blood, and the alpha king of a broken pack offered her safety like it was the simplest thing in the world. When Captain Risa touched her elbow asking silently, Anastasia went. The guest chamber was cleaner than any room she had slept in since childhood. Stone walls scrubbed pale, a narrow bed piled with wool blankets, a brazier already lit against the wet cold. A basin of hot water steamed on a stand. Someone had left bread, cheese, and tea untouched by pitying notes or questions. Anastasia stared at it all and felt trapped. Safety had walls, too. By full dark, she couldn't bear the bed. Couldn't bear the smell of clean linen that reminded her of rooms where doors locked from the outside. She took the basin and retreated to the old laundry corridor behind the kitchens, where steam and noise made solitude possible. There, beside a drain trough, she shrugged off her shift and cloak and began scrubbing blood from her back With a rag, she'd boiled herself. Every swipe burned. The old strap scars had split during her flight through the ravine. Fresh edges leaked pink into the water. She bit her wrist to muffle sound. Footsteps approached. She spun, knife in hand, before she thought. Brennan stopped at the threshold, hands up exactly as he had done in the square. No guards, no witnesses. Just him in a dark shirt with sleeves rolled and damp hair like he'd run his hands through it too many times. I knocked, he said quietly. You didn't answer. She kept the knife raised. So you came in anyway. A shadow of shame crossed his face. You're right. I should have waited. He should have pushed. Dante would have. Every man with rank she had ever known would have. Brennan stepped back until he was fully outside the room. May I enter? The question dropped between them like fragile glass. Anastasia's grip tightened on the knife. Her back throbbed. The bond pulsed, warm and insistent, reacting to his proximity with maddening relief. Why are you here? Risa told me you skipped supper and took hot water to the service wing. His jaw flexed. Your scent carried blood. She almost lied. It's old. It reopened. Silence. Steam curled from the basin between them. Somewhere down the corridor, kettles clanged and someone laughed. Ordinary sounds. Unreal. Anastasia lowered the knife a fraction. If I say no, I leave. No argument. No wounded pride. She hated how much that mattered. Enter. He came in slowly, eyes on hers, then stopped 3 paces away. Only then did he glance at her back and went very still. Anger flickered across his features, hot and immediate, then banked under deliberate control. May I look? She gave a jerky nod. May I touch you to clean them? The second question nearly undid her. Yes, she whispered. Brennan moved like a man handling something holy and breakable. He knelt beside the basin, tested the water with 2 fingers, then frowned. Too cool. He crossed to the stove tucked in the corner, fed it kindling himself, and waited until the kettle hissed before returning. Alpha King, she thought numbly, heating wash water with his own hands while council wolves argued over heirs and law. Hurt. His eyes lifted to hers. Hurt. His eyes lifted to hers. Storm dark. I know. I'm trying not to add to it. He cleaned each wound with infuriating patience, bracing one hand near her hip without pinning her, giving her room to flinch away. He didn't ask how she got the scars. Didn't demand names. Didn't turn gentleness into interrogation. When she hissed at a deeper cut, he paused immediately. Breathe with me, he said. She almost laughed at the absurdity, and then found herself matching his inhale, exhale, inhale, while the burn eased enough to survive. After, he uncorked a small tin of salve and spread it with careful fingers. Herbal, sharp with pine resin, Shadowfang medicine, not Ironhold salt and punishment. You keep apologizing with your shoulders, he said after a while, being harmed. The words were so foreign, being harmed. The words were so foreign she didn't understand them at first. I caused a political disaster in your square, she said instead, brittle. My sister is claiming your heir. Dante is waiving contracts. Your council will tear itself apart by dawn. I brought that to your door. Brennan set the salve down. For the first time, he touched her not as patient but as person. 2 fingertips, barely there against her shoulder where skin was unbroken. He waited until she nodded, then let his hand rest, warm and steady. You are not trouble, he said. You are survival. Something cracked inside her chest. She looked away fast, furious at the sting behind her eyes. Crying had always been dangerous. Tears invited punishment for weakness. Here they came anyway, silent, humiliating. Brennan pretended not to notice. He rose, crossed to the hook by the door, and took off the heavy cloak he'd worn at the summit. The dark one pinned with the Shadowfang crest in silver thread. Ceremonial. Clearly not meant for servants' corridors. He held it out. Wear this tonight. I can't take your insignia. You can. I'm giving it. She stared. Why? Because every linen shift in this keep smells like service quarters and soap ash. A grim half-smile. You flinch every time you see one. She hadn't realized he'd noticed. Slowly, she took the cloak. It was warm from his body, lined in thick wool, smelling of pine, rain, and the lightning scent that now lived under her skin. At the door, he paused. There's guard posted outside your chamber, but if you prefer this corridor, I'll station them here instead. Your choice. Choice. Anastasia swallowed hard. My chamber. Done. He inclined his head, equal to equal. Rest if you can. Council reconvenes at first light. He left without waiting for thanks. She sat alone in steam and dim firelight, wrapped in an Alpha King's cloak, and cried only after his footsteps faded. By dawn, the long hall hummed like a drawn bowstring. Carved cedar pillars held up a roof blackened by old fire. Repaired banners hung beside scorch marks no one had painted over. At the center stood the council table, newly rebuilt from mismatched planks, practical, stubborn, scarred. Anastasia took her assigned place near Captain Risa with Brennan at the table's head. Elders fanned to either side, allied envoys along the wall. Dante arrived immaculate in black, legal scrolls stacked before him. Evelina glided in pale blue this time, one hand still curved over her belly, eyes damp and luminous. 3 hired healers waited behind them like crows. Proceedings began with ritual oaths. By certain females. Brennan's stare could be induced by certain females. Brennan's stare could have skinned bark. Watch your language. Mar grunted but continued. The timing is suspect. She appears exactly when Lady Evelina announces carrying your heir. Convenient. Envoy Talwick of Frostmere leaned forward, rings clinking. With respect, Alpha King, your judgment may be compromised. Until claims are verified, the Ironhold contract regarding Anastasia should be honored provisionally. Provisional slavery, dressed in law. Anastasia kept her spine straight and hands flat on the table, though her nails bit crescents into her palms. Old instinct screamed at her to shrink, to appease, to say, I'm sorry, before the blow landed. Dante unrolled a parchment with theatrical care. As you see, witnessed by 2 pack betas and a licensed scribe. Claim bond acknowledged, cohabitation established, property rights. Property rights over a sentient wolf are void in my lands, Brennan said. Under your lands, perhaps. Under compact precedent. Precedent forged by men who sold daughters for grain. A rustle swept the elders. Evelina dabbed at her eyes. Must we fight like this? I came for protection. For my child. Anastasia spoke before fear could close her throat. Then swear to your claim at the Moonwell. Every head turned. Evelina froze. That is unnecessary. Is it? Anastasia met her twin's gaze and saw for the first time in years a hairline crack in Evelina's composure. If you carry Brennan's heir, the well will bless you. If you don't, it will strip glamour and perjury both. Dante's smile thinned. Convenient suggestion from a woman avoiding her legal mate. I'm avoiding my jailer. Mar slammed a fist on wood. Enough. We still must verify whether this female's scent truly carries bondmark. Envoy Talwick, you have a neutral nose. Inspect. Talwick stood and came around the table. Anastasia's stomach dropped. The room blurred at the edges. She pushed back her chair on reflex, but behind her was stone wall. Nowhere to retreat. Talwick reached for her arm with bureaucratic impatience, as if she were livestock at market. He never touched her. The table exploded. Brennan's hand came down once, one strike, and thick cedar split down the center with a crack like gunfire. Ink pots jumped, scrolls flew. Elders lurched back cursing as wood shards skittered across the floor. In the same motion, Brennan shoved his chair aside and stepped between Talwick and Anastasia, body half shifted before anyone drew breath. Claws punched through fingertips. Canines lengthened. Gold fire consumed his eyes. His voice dropped into the resonance of alpha command, the kind that hit bone. "Sit down." Talwick sat. No one else moved. Brennan kept his gaze on the room, not her, making himself barrier, not cage. "Hear me under alpha law," he said, each word precise. "Any harm, coercion, or non-consensual contact against an unclaimed but bond-marked mate is treason against Shadowfang." An elder sputtered. "She is not formally claimed." "Exactly," Brennan snapped. "Unclaimed does not mean unprotected. It means her choice is sovereign." The hall went very quiet. Anastasia stared at the breadth of his back, at the torn seam where his shirt strained over partial shift, at the way every powerful man in the room had just taken one involuntary step away from her because he stood there. No one had ever stepped between her and danger without demanding payment after. Brennan turned his head enough for her to see one human eye returning through the gold. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice abruptly gentler. She shook her head, unable to speak. He faced the council again. "Proceed by law, not hands. Evidence only. We convene Moonwell trial by tonight's moonrise unless both claimants withdraw." Dante rose slowly, fury leaking through polish. "You gamble your alliance on a runaway." Brennan's lip curled, faintly feral. "I gamble it on truth." Evelina's fingers dug into her own palm, smile fixed and cracking. Anastasia inhaled, and for once the air entering her lungs did not taste like surrender. When Brennan resumed his seat, he didn't reach for her. He only set a cup of water within easy distance of her hand, then looked back to the law scrolls as if this, respect, restraint, defense without ownership, were ordinary. Anastasia wrapped her fingers around the cup. Her hands still trembled, but less. For the first time since the ravine, she let herself believe staying might not be another kind of cage. Staying might not be another kind of cage. The thought barely settled before Dante slid another scroll across the splintered remains of the council table. "Since Shadowfang law now prefers theatrics," he said, voice smooth as oil, "allow me to provide documentation your dramatics cannot shred." A scribe in Ironhold colors broke the black wax seal and read aloud, each word clipped and ceremonial. "Lineage attestation, Evelina Ironhold, by blood witness and ancestral registry, confirmed sole surviving issue of Queen Seraphine Ironhold." The hall erupted, half scoffs, half startled curses. Anastasia went cold. Queen Seraphine, their mother's name, spoken like a forged coin. Brennan didn't touch the parchment. "Your source?" Dante nodded toward an older wolf at the back, thin as a nail with ink-stained hands. "Archivist Peller, formerly of Ironhold Royal Records." Peller bowed too low. "The Queen's private ledgers survived the siege, my lords. I corrected them under oath." "Corrected?" Anastasia's voice came out sharp. "You burned names and called it correction." Peller's eyes flicked to Dante before returning to the floor. "Records were damaged." "Damaged by whose order?" Dante smiled. "Careful, little oath. Accusing archivists of treason usually requires proof." He was doing it in stages, exactly as she'd heard through the solar door. Healer records, lineage scrolls, legal claim, paper walls rising fast enough to bury truth under procedure. Brennan turned to his law speaker, an older she-wolf named Ilya with silver-braided hair and a scar that split her lower lip. She examined the seal without touching ink. "Wax is old," she said. "Could be genuine. The bond contract." "He didn't wait for the bond contract?" He didn't wait for permission. Another parchment unfurled, thicker, darker, edged with dried blood. Anastasia's stomach lurched. She knew that script, knew the slant of Dante's hand where he'd written over legal forms not meant for wolves like her. I, Dante Ironhold, the scribe read, maintain lawful claim over Anastasia, marked and witnessed. Stop. Brennan's word cracked like a whip. The scribe fell silent. Brennan rose, palms flat on broken cedar. You carved a coercive mark on a captive wolf and call that lawful? Dante's expression hardened, civility peeling back. I formalized a mate who tried to flee her duty. Duty, Anastasia repeated. Is that what you call chains now? He faced her fully, eyes bright with contempt. I call it order. You are useful by blood, unstable by temperament, and catastrophic by ambition. I gave you purpose. The room smelled suddenly of copper and old smoke. Her pulse hammered at her throat, right over the forged brand. Brennan moved one step toward Dante. Explain useful by blood. Dante hesitated. Tiny, but there. Anastasia spoke before he could sidestep. War relics, she said, gaze locked on Brennan's. Ironhold vault relics keyed to royal blood. He needs a true line descendant to wake them. Shock rippled through the council. Dante laughed once, low and dangerous. Paranoia now. Convenient. But Elder Mar swore under his breath. Ironhold arsenal myths. Not myths, Ilya said grimly. Old compact records mention blood-locked armories. Dante spread his hands. Even if such relics existed, why would I confess strategy in a rival hall? Listen to yourselves. You're letting a runaway servant set policy. There it was, the blade hidden in the argument. If she was servant, she could be owned. If owned, she could be surrendered. If surrendered, Dante got his key. Evelina dabbed at her eyes, then looked directly at Brennan. My lord, this is what she does. Spins stories until men forget the child at stake. Brennan didn't look at Evelina. He looked at Anastasia, measuring something deep and private in her face, then turned back to counsel. Moonwell at moonrise, he said. All claims tested. Pregnancy, lineage, bond contract legitimacy, blood oath admissible, refusal counted as admission of fraud. Dante's jaw ticked. You force a royal lady to bleed in public? Brennan's answer was flat. I force no one. I set one law for all. For the first time, real anger flashed across Evelina's features. Gone in a blink, replaced by tremble and lowered lashes. Dante gathered his scrolls with precise fingers. Very well, he said. Moonrise, then. And if this farce stains my house, Shadowfang will answer before the full alliance. He turned on his heel and strode out, Evelina drifting after him like pale poison. Their escorts followed, boots thudding in a tight formation that felt less like retreat and more like repositioning for attack. When the doors slammed, the hall exhaled as one. Ilya muttered. He came prepared for every route. Brennan's gaze stayed on the closed doors. Because this was never about one claim. Anastasia rubbed her wrist where the mate bond had first ignited, skin still warm under the memory of his hand. No, she said quietly. It's about a throne and a war. By late afternoon, Shadowfang Keep felt like a hive struck with a stick. Messengers sprinted corridors, scribes copied statutes for witness circles, guards doubled at every gate. In the lower courtyard, workers still hauled lumber because winter didn't care about scandal, while above them, council wolves argued over blood law precedents and emergency succession clauses until voices went hoarse. Anastasia stood at a narrow window alcove, Brennan's cloak wrapped tight around her, watching clouds drag low over the mountains. The bond was worse in motion. When Brennan crossed the yard below to inspect sentry lines, heat flared low in her spine. When he disappeared into the armory, it thinned to a restless ache. Every shift in distance mapped itself through her body with humiliating accuracy. She hated it. She craved it. Both truths sat in her chest like opposing blades. Drink. Captain Risa pressed a cup into her hand. Bitter willow tea. Grounding herbs. Anastasia obeyed automatically. How bad? Risa leaned shoulder to stone beside her. 3 Allied envoys threatened withdrawal if the trial looks rigged. Frostmere wants written assurance we won't execute their man for the arm incident. Grain trains from the south are already delayed. She glanced over. If the alliance fractures, people starve before first thaw. No pressure at all. Anastasia stared into the tea. If I run now, does this stop? Risa snorted. No. Then Dante screams we hid stolen property, marches legal wolves to our gates, and half the North calls it justified. Property, Anastasia said, tasting ash. Risa's jaw hardened. Not in my pack. Below, children chased each other between scaffold piles, shrieking with laughter, their boots splashing puddles. One pup crashed into a stack of kindling and popped up grinning, missing 2 front teeth. Another guard ruffled his hair and shoved him back toward safety. Anastasia watched them and felt something old and brittle inside her crack. She remembered being that small, before ledgers changed and doors locked, and Evelina learned how to weaponize tears. A page skidded into the alcove, panting. Lady Anastasia? Alpha requests your presence in the West Records room. Risa lifted a brow. Go. I'll peel ears off anyone who follows. The records room smelled like dust, pine tar, and rain damp seeping through old mortar. Brennan stood over a table strewn with copied contracts and compact law books, sleeves rolled, hair tied back with leather cord. His sword belt hung on a chair. Without it, he looked younger, and more dangerous somehow. He glanced up when she entered, and the bond surged so hard she caught the table edge. His nostrils flared. Too sharp? She nodded, annoyed by breathlessness. It spikes when you're near. Same. He pushed a small cloth bundle toward her. Ilya's grounding stones. Hold one. Inside were smooth river rocks etched with moon runes. She curled her fingers around one, cool weight anchoring her. The burn under her skin eased to a tolerable hum. Brennan gestured to a parchment. I need your memory. This clause. Ironhold emergency succession. Dante wants me cornered under it. She scanned the lines, old legal script blurring then resolving. If a ruling line is threatened with extinction and carrying issue is confirmed, Allied Alpha may be compelled to immediate union for territorial stability. Her laugh was bleak. He's trying to make your refusal look like treason against order. And if I refuse anyway? Half the old houses call you oathbreaker. He gains moral ground for war. He leaned on both hands. I don't mate under coercion. Something in her chest loosened and ached at once. He watched her too closely. What are you not saying? She hesitated. Then. Dante has already seeded the idea I'm unstable. If Evelina's glamour holds long enough, if your bond to me is framed as manipulation, they could invalidate my testimony before the well even tests us. Then we make sure it tests you first. She looked up. Why trust me this quickly? The question landed hard between them, even though doing so paints a bigger target on your back. His mouth tightened. And because the bond isn't a leash to me, it's information. It tells me when you're lying to yourself mostly. Despite everything, a startled huff escaped her, almost a laugh. His eyes softened. There it is. What? You, not the mask. Footsteps sounded in the hall, fast, urgent, then passed without stopping. The keep never settled. Pressure climbed with every hour toward moonrise. Anastasia set the runestone down carefully. If this fails tonight, I won't let you hand me over. Brennan went very still. I won't. You may not get that choice. He stepped around the table, slow enough to let her retreat. She didn't. Then I'll make one, he said. The bond thrummed, answering him. Rain began just before dusk, fine and silver across the inner courtyard. Torches hissed as guards lit the path toward the Moonwell Ridge beyond the keep walls. Anastasia stood under the archway, tying Brennan's cloak tighter when he appeared at her side, with 2 cups of steaming broth, and no entourage. Risa says you skipped second meal, he said. She reports everything. Only what matters. He offered a cup. Their fingers brushed. Brief. Accidental. Electric. Heat raced up her arm, but this time she didn't yank away. She took the broth and drank. Salt, garlic, a little too hot. Real food. She hadn't realized how badly she was shaking until warmth hit her stomach. They stood shoulder to shoulder watching rain stripe the courtyard stones. After a while, Brennan said, "When the massacre hit Shadowfang, I lost 32 wolves in one night, including my younger brother." His voice was matter-of-fact, but his grip tightened on the cup. After, every elder told me to rule harder. Clamp down. Make fear do what trust couldn't. Anastasia glanced at him. He kept his eyes on the rain. Fear works fast. It also rots everything it touches. She thought of Dante's smile, Evelina's perfume, the scrape of cuffs. Yes. Brennan finally looked at her. I won't build this pack the way he built you. The quiet certainty of it nearly hurt. She set her empty cup down. I need to tell you something before the well. His expression sharpened. Tell me. My mother was Queen Seraphine's daughter by first union. She swallowed. Which makes me, not Evelina, the direct line. Dante knew. He erased it. Brennan didn't flinch. I guessed. I needed you to choose to say it. She gave him a brittle smile. You keep handing me choices like gifts. I don't know what to do with them. Use them badly at first, he said, almost smiling back. Still better than chains? She laughed. Small, real. Then her face sobered. Dante carries a key on his belt. Black iron, wolf head pommel. It opens the lower Ironhold war vault. He planned to force my blood on the seal. Brennan's eyes went flat with strategic calculation. Can he trigger it without you? I don't know. I wasn't allowed near the vault after 12, but he believes he needs true line blood, and he's patient enough to cut slowly. Brennan set his cup aside. Then tonight we end his access to you and that key. The rain softened. Somewhere in the keep, a bell rang once. First call to assemble for Moonwell procession. Anastasia's pulse kicked. I'm afraid. Good, he said quietly. Means you understand the stakes. Fear isn't failure. She stared at him, at the scar through his brow, at the steadiness he wore like armor and promise both. What if the well exposes everything and they still choose him? Then they choose in full view of truth. His voice roughened. And I stop calling this an alliance. Before she could think better, she reached for his wrist. Brennan. He stilled under her hand, waiting. Earlier, she said, throat tight, when you asked before touching me, no one has ever asked. His gaze dropped to her fingers on his skin, then back to her face. May I touch you now? The question was a key turning in a rusted lock. She nodded. He lifted his hand and cupped the side of her jaw, warm palm rough with old blade calluses, touch so gentle she felt it in her bones. No forcing, no claim, just presence. She leaned into it before fear could stop her, eyes closing for one breath, two. The bell rang again, louder. Duty snapped the moment. Brennan lowered his hand, but let his thumb brush her cheek once, reverent and brief. When we step to that well, he said, you are not alone. She believed him. That might have been the most dangerous thing of all. The procession formed in the lower yard under torchlight and rain, council elders in ceremonial bands, envoys under their house colors, scribes with waterproof satchels, guard rings, doubled. At the center path, Brennan and Anastasia walked side by side toward the gate leading up the ridge to the Moonwell, with Riza and Ilya flanking close. Dante and Evelina were already waiting near the front rank, sheltered beneath a black canopy. Evelina looked wan and luminous, hand curved over her false swell. Dante wore a ceremonial blade and, at his belt, exactly as Anastasia described, a black iron key with a wolf head pommel. Her skin crawled. The outer gate creaked open. Then a howl tore through the rain, high, ragged, wrong. A sentry sprinted down the ridge path, blood on his sleeve, mud to his knees. He crashed through the formation and dropped hard before Brennan, gasping. Ambush! North Nursery Trail, he choked. Smoke bombs, masked wolves, took the children from the evening forage line. Everything stopped. Risa grabbed him by the shoulders. How many? 3 pups. His voice broke. Luca, Nessa, and Bryn. We found the escorts drugged, not dead, and... He fumbled at his satchel with shaking hands. And this. He pulled out 3 small silver collars, clotted red at the clasps. Nessa's had a tiny moon charm bent sideways. Anastasia had seen that pup wearing it in the yard. A sound left Brennan that didn't belong to any human throat. Ilya snatched the attached note, scanned it once, and went pale. Read, Brennan ordered, voice carved from ice. She read aloud anyway, because everyone had to hear. Moonrise bargain. Surrender Anastasia Ironhold alive at the Hollow Fang Stones before the well is called, and the pups return breathing. Refuse, delay, or bring army, and their hearts arrive before midnight. D.I. The initials hit like a blade point. All eyes swung to Dante. He didn't even bother pretending shock. He only lifted one brow, slow, insulted. You accuse me of this in public? How crude. Brennan's wolf surged under his skin, claws flashing as he stepped forward. Guards braced, expecting a strike. Dante smiled, rain beating on his lashes. Careful, Alpha King. Kill me now. And if my allies don't return by midnight, your pups die anyway. Anastasia stared at him, at the calm cruelty she knew too well, at Evelina's faint, satisfied curve of mouth. This had never been about winning law cleanly. It was always blood and leverage. She looked at the silver collars in Risa's hands and felt the world tip towards something sharp and final. Moonrise, the note said. Surrender, Anastasia. The bell on the ridge rang a 3rd time, calling witnesses to truth while somewhere in the storm 3 children waited for knives. The bell on the ridge rang a 3rd time, calling witnesses to truth while somewhere in the storm 3 children waited for knives. For 1 heartbeat, no one moved. Then the yard detonated into voices. Take the offer, Envoy Talwick barked, pale and sweating. 3 pups for 1 disputed woman is not... Risa slammed him back with a forearm to the chest. Finish that sentence and lose your teeth. Elder Mar rounded on Brennan. Alpha, if the children die because we refused... If the children die, Brennan said, each word deadly quiet, it will be because Dante took them. Dante gave a wounded sigh. How dramatic. I warned you this female brings catastrophe. Anastasia stepped forward before she could think herself out of it. Rain slicked her hair to her temples. Brennan's cloak hung heavy on her shoulders. Where are they? Dante's gaze slid over her like a blade. Safe, for now. Hollow Fang Stones. Moonrise. Alone. Brennan moved between them instantly. No. Then keep your mate, Dante said, smiling, and collect small hearts in a sack. Brennan's claws flashed again. Anastasia caught his wrist. The contact jolted both of them, hot, electric, brutal, and his wolf shuddered under skin. He looked down at her hand, then at her face, breathing hard. I can't let 3 children die for me, she whispered. You're not going to him. Then he kills them, Ilya pushed through the ring of guards with the note still in hand. It's written in blood ink. Time binding. If we ignore it, the threat executes regardless of his survival. Her scarred mouth tightened. He set this to force immediate surrender. Risa cursed viciously. Brennan's jaw worked. We split forces. Risa, take trackers to Hollowfang. Dante laughed. Do. My men are watching. Any war party and the pups bleed before you clear the lower pass. As if on cue, a horn sounded from beyond the outer wall. Single, mocking, iron-hold pitch. Anastasia felt the trap close. Handed over, she vanished into Dante's chains. Refused, the pups died. Fought now, his contingencies triggered. He had designed every path to break Brennan publicly and her privately. Not every path, she thought suddenly. Not if truth moved faster than terror. She turned to Brennan, voice low and urgent. Moonwell. His eyes narrowed. He said before the well is called. Then we call it now, publicly. If we expose him before witnesses, his own escorts fracture. We force his hand into the open where everyone can see it. He'll still have the children. I know. Her throat tightened. But I can reach them if I can get near him and that key on his belt. His head snapped toward Dante's hip, then back. Understanding flashed, and fear, fierce and immediate. Too dangerous. She held his gaze. You offered to smuggle me away this afternoon. I did. I refuse. The words came steady now, chosen. No more running, no more disappearing so men can write my fate in ink. I stand trial, and I end this where everyone can see. Around them, the yard seemed to pause, as if the storm itself leaned in. Brennan searched her face for a long second, wolf-bright eyes burning gold in the rain. Then he gave one hard nod. Procession continues, he said, voice carrying. Moonwell now. Full witness circle. Any interference is admission of guilt. Dante's smile thinned. You really think a puddle of old magic will save you? Anastasia looked straight at him. No, but it will strip you bare first. The Moonwell sat in a ring of black stone at the top of the ridge, open to rain and sky. Ancient runes carved the surrounding pillars. Rested on a pedestal of ironwood beside the basin, the old Ironhold trial relic, taken in treaty generations ago. Witnesses formed concentric circles under torch and rain. Elders, envoys, guards, workers still in mud-stained leathers, even kitchen hands with flour on their cuffs. No private verdict tonight. Ilya raised her staff. By compact law and moon witness, claims are called in order: lineage, pregnancy, bond contract. Evelina took a shuddering breath and stepped forward first, every inch the grieving noble. I carry Brennan Shadowfang's heir. Blood first, Ilya said. A servant brought a ritual blade. Evelina recoiled. I'm with child. You'd risk. Then decline and yield claim. Evelina's eyes flicked to Dante. He gave the tiniest nod. She pricked her finger and let 3 drops fall into the well. For a breath, nothing happened. Across her abdomen in ugly violet script, illusion lattice tied to a belt hidden beneath her gown. The false swell collapsed flat before everyone. Gasps ripped through the circle. Risa swore aloud. Mar staggered back. Talwik stared, mouth open. Evelina clutched at her stomach in panic, fingers tangling in exposed runework. No, this is wrong, this is a trick. The well pulsed once, and her voice cracked under it. Ilya's tone went iron hard. Perjury to the Moonwell? Dante stepped forward at once. She was frightened, coerced. This proves nothing about lineage, Anastasia said. She walked to the pedestal, every eye on her, and lifted the obsidian crown with both hands. It was heavier than it looked, cold enough to burn. Rain ran down her wrists. Brennan took one involuntary step toward her. She met his gaze and shook her head once. "Trust me." He stopped. Anastasia set the crown edge against her palm and drew it hard. Blood welled bright and immediate. She held her hand over the well. "My name is Anastasia Ironhold," she said, voice ringing across stone and storm. "Daughter of Lyra, daughter of Queen Seraphine's first union, erased from ledgers by force, branded by coercion, kept alive for blood access to war relics." Her blood hit the water. The moonwell erupted. Blue-white fire raced through the runes around the basin, up the pillars, across the crown in her hand. The glow wrapped her like armor. In the water's surface, sigils unfolded. Old Ironhold royal marks no forger could fake. Then burned into the air above her in silver-gold flame. Witnesses dropped to knees in shock. "Goddess preserve," someone whispered. Ilya bowed her head. Line acknowledged. Dante's mask cracked. Anastasia turned, blood still running down her wrist, and pointed straight at him. "You forged lineage. You forged pregnancy. You forged a claim bond contract." He snarled, losing polish. "You think blood makes you queen? You were always weak. Then why chain me for years?" A low rumble built through the crowd. Anger, shame, realization. Dante's hand dropped to his belt. Anastasia moved first. She lunged off the well step, seized his wrist with her uninjured hand, and drove her knee into his thigh. He cursed and twisted. They crashed together in the rain, boots skidding on wet stone. His fingers clawed for her throat. She ripped the black iron key from his belt. For one wild second they froze, face to face, rain and breath and hate between them. She slammed the key into the well's iron rim and shouted, "By blood of Seraphine's line, I command Ironhold wardlocks. Open hollow fang-holding cave. Release all living captives now." The well answered. Blue fire shot down the key, along the stone channels carved beneath the ridge, and vanished into the mountain like lightning seeking buried metal. Dante went white. "No," he breathed. A scout on the outer ring jerked, pressing fingers to his temple where his pack-link charm glowed. "Message from North Trail," he shouted. "Hollow Fang gates just blew open. Pups are out. Repeat, pups are out and running with our trackers." The crowd roared. Dante howled and backhanded Anastasia hard enough to spin her. She hit the steps, tasting blood. Brennan surged forward. "Stand down," Anastasia screamed, pushing to her feet. Rain streamed red down her lip. "This is my ending." Brennan stopped like he'd struck a wall, chest heaving, every instinct fighting the order. Dante laughed, feral and ragged. "Your ending, then." Bones cracked. He shifted into war form in a violent snap of muscle and fur, larger than any wolf in the circle, iron-dark coat bristling, one eye scarred white, jaws lined with too many teeth. He launched straight at her. She met him with steel. Risa threw the Ironhold crescent blade. Anastasia caught it mid-air by instinct she hadn't used in years. The old weapon sang in her grip, curved edge bright against stormlight. Dante hit like a falling tree. She rolled, blade carving a line across his shoulder. He roared and wheeled, claws gouging stone where her head had been. "Anastasia!" Brennan's voice, torn raw. She didn't look at him. Dante circled low, lips peeled back. "You belong to me," he snarled through fangs. "By blood and bruise." She spat rainwater and blood. "You mistook survival for submission." He feinted left, then slammed right. Claws raked her forearm. White pain flashed. She drove the crescent up under his ribs. He twisted, taking a shallow cut instead of a killing one, and his weight crushed her to the steps. Hot breath blasted her face. His jaws snapped inches from her throat. "You were made to kneel," he hissed. Anastasia slammed the obsidian crown into his temple with her free hand. He recoiled, stunned. She kicked his chest, rolled clear, came up on one knee. "No," she said, voice ringing over thunder. I was born to rise. He charged again. This time she stepped in, not back. At the last instant she dropped her center, caught his descending foreleg, and brought the crescent down in a brutal arc at the arm marked by his claim runes. Dante screamed as the strike took his claim-marking hand out of the fight. Dark blood streaked the Moonwell steps. Blue fire leapt from the well and engulfed the severed flesh. The forged bond at Anastasia's throat burned, flared, and then shattered like glass under skin. Relief ripped through her so violently she nearly collapsed. Dante staggered, half-shifting erratically, one arm ending in ruin. Still he lunged, madness and hatred driving him forward. Anastasia planted her boots, lifted the crescent two-handed, and drove the final strike home. Dante's body jolted. His human eyes flashed through wolf form, wide with unbelieving rage. You! He rasped. Judgment, Anastasia said. She wrenched the blade back and stepped away. Dante Ironhold fell to his knees at the Moonwell, then pitched forward into rainwater and blue fire. The well flared, consumed the spilled blood contract magic in a final hiss, and went still. Silence slammed down over the ridge. Then Brennan was there, not taking over, not stealing the victory, just dropping to one knee beside her, hands hovering until she nodded. He touched her face. You're bleeding. So are you, she said, because she could smell where he'd bitten his own tongue holding position. He huffed a broken laugh, forehead touching hers for one brief, shaking second. Behind them, Ilya's voice rose over the witnesses. By Moonlaw and Blood Witness, Dante Ironhold is dead by rightful combat. Fraud proven. Coercive bond extinguished. Guards hauled Evelina forward when she tried to run. Her hair had come loose, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked less like a lady now and more like the mirror Anastasia had dreaded all her life. Same face, hollowed by greed. Evelina dropped to her knees, hands clasped. Anna, please. He made me do it. I was scared. Anastasia looked at her twin for a long moment and felt, finally, nothing like sisterhood. Only grief for what might have been. You watched, she said quietly. And you chose. Evelina's mouth trembled. Don't let them brand me. Ilya stepped forward with the truth iron. Sentence for Moonwell perjury, false succession claim, and child endangerment conspiracy. Exile under truth brand. She may speak no deliberate lie in allied lands without pain. Evelina screamed as the heated sigil touched her wrist. No one looked away. The storm broke just before dawn. Clouds tore open above the ridge, moonlight pouring silver over wet stone, blood, and witnesses too exhausted to move. Word had already come by runner. Luca, Nessa, and Bryn recovered alive, shivering and furious, currently wrapped in every blanket in the infirmary and demanding sweet buns. Only then did Brennan stand before the assembled circle and remove his torque. He faced Anastasia in full view of pack and crown witnesses, voice rough but steady. Anastasia Ironhold, do you choose me without coercion? Every scar on her body seemed to listen. She stepped toward him, rain-damp hair clinging to her neck, Dante's blood drying on her sleeve, moonlight on her skin. Yes, she said, clear, certain. I choose you. His eyes flashed molten gold. She caught his collar, pulled him down, and turned her head to bare the junction of neck and shoulder, offering first. Not surrender. Invitation. Brennan held still for one heartbeat, giving her time to stop him. She pressed closer instead. Mine, she whispered against his ear, surprising herself with the fierceness of it. A shudder went through him. Yours? He answered. Then he bit. Pain lanced hot and sharp through her throat into her spine, a clean puncture that should have dropped her. And then the bond blew open like sunrise through storm. Molten warmth flooded every limb. The bite burned, then transformed. ache turning to a deep, pulsing pleasure that rolled through her belly and chest and down to her fingertips. Her wolf surged up, not trapped now, not chained, awake and wild and singing. She gasped his name. He growled low in his throat, holding the bite deep but controlled, exactly as promised. Reverent, never taking more than she gave. Their scents braided in the air, pine, rain, blood, lightning, until she couldn't tell where one ended. When he released, his mark flared at her throat in silver gold. The witnesses erupted, howls, fist-to-chest salutes, sobbing laughter from wolves who had seen too much death and needed one clean beginning. But Anastasia wasn't done. She cupped Brennan's jaw and turned him, exposing the heavy line of his shoulder where muscle met neck. His pupils blew wide. "May I?" she asked, breath shaking. He bared his throat to her in answer. "Always, mate." She bit down. His body bowed with a raw sound that was half pain, half wonder. The taste of him hit her tongue. Salt, iron, thunder. Power rushed back through the bond in a brilliant tide. Not possession, reciprocity. His strength, his grief, his relentless steadiness, his hunger, his tenderness in a steam-filled laundry corridor. All of it flooded her and met her own fury, survival, and hard-won will without swallowing either. Her mark blazed on his shoulder, silver threaded with gold. They both threw their heads back and howled as one. The sound rolled over the moonwell, down the ridge, through the waking keep. 3 pups in the infirmary answered with high, indignant yips. Laughter broke out through tears. Brennan gathered her in, careful of fresh wounds, then tighter when she clutched him back just as hard. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling. "Mine," he murmured. "Yours," she whispered. "Mate. Mate." They stayed like that until the tremor under her skin settled into a steady hum. Bond no longer a snapped wire, but a living line, warm and certain and chosen. When they finally turned back to the witnesses, Ilya knelt first. Then Risa. Then Mar, gruff and red-eyed. One by one, the circle bowed. Not to fear, but to truth survived. 3 days later, sunlight streamed through the rebuilt long hall windows and caught on fresh ink. No black wax. No forged seals. Anastasia stood at the head of the council table beside Brennan, her mark visible above a high-collared dark dress stitched with both iron-hulled silver and Shadowfang charcoal. The room smelled of sawdust and new parchment. Ilya read the first decree aloud. By joint authority of Alpha King Brennan Shadowfang and Queen Heir Anastasia Ironhold, all mate property contracts, blood ownership claims, and coercive bond instruments are abolished across Shadowfang and restored Ironhold territories. Any attempt to enforce such claim is a Class 1 felony under Alliance law. She set the seal. Brennan handed the signet to Anastasia. Anastasia pressed Ironhold royal silver into wax beside Shadowfang iron. "No one," she said, voice carrying, "will ever be legal property again." Risa thumped fist to chest so hard her armor rang. Ilya unrolled the second decree. Moonwell trial protocol adopted for succession, pregnancy, and bond disputes where fraud is alleged. Refusal constitutes legal concession. Talwick, now bandaged and much humbler, signed as witness without argument. At the back of the hall, Evelina stood between 2 guards, truth brand stark on her wrist. She wore plain wool, no jewels. "Is East Border," Risa said flatly. "Yule is East Border," Risa said flatly. "You'll be escorted to the line at noon. Cross back without summons. You lose the hand that forged glamour." Evelina looked at Anastasia one last time. "You ruined me." Anastasia met her gaze. "You did that yourself." The guards led Evelina out into hard noon light. Archivist Peller followed under separate escort, stripped of rank, and sentenced to labor restitution, cataloging true records in public archive where no seal could vanish without witness. Elder Mar volunteered oversight with the grim enthusiasm of a man atoning. By afternoon, the hall emptied into work. In the lower courtyard, Brennan and Anastasia walked side by side past stacks of timber, where former servants and noble-born youths trained together under Risa's barked drills. At one table, Ilya taught law to apprentices from 3 packs, including 2 kitchen girls who still wore flour on their sleeves. Near the infirmary door, Luca, Nessa, and Bryn ambushed Anastasia's legs in a tangle of blanket capes and fierce hugs. "You cut the bad man," Bryn announced with awe. Anastasia crouched, wincing, and smiled. "I did." Nessa pointed at the mark on her throat. "Does it hurt?" "Less every day." Lucas squinted up at Brennan. "Did she bite you too?" Brennan, deadly Alpha King of the North, looked solemn. "Yes. Very scary." The pups cackled. As dusk settled, workers lit lanterns along the half-built schoolhouse foundation where old servant quarters had been torn down. Anastasia stood with Brennan on the threshold stone, their shoulders touching, and watched children race between chalk-marked room lines arguing about who got the window seats. Brennan threaded his fingers through hers, bond warm and steady. "Queen Luna," he said, testing the title with a smile. She leaned into him. "Alpha King." Below them, Risa yelled at 2 trainees for sloppy footing. Ilya argued statutes with Talwick over a crate of nails. Somewhere in the kitchens, someone burned bread and swore creatively. Ordinary life, loud and stubborn. Anastasia looked out over rebuilt walls, mixed banners, and wolves who no longer lowered their eyes when she passed. She touched the mark at her throat, then the one on Brennan's shoulder through his shirt. "No chains," she said softly. "No lies," he answered. She smiled, fierce and free. "Only chosen,"